Hi, Futards. Today, we talk with Bigz, who's been with us since the very beginning. We talk about his background, quantitative finance, coding, state of Solana DevX, how he found profit, the early days of the MetaDAO, his contributions to the project, Futarchy, implementation trade-off, conditional and prediction markets, polymarket, macro, or supply, how to build a successful startup, and much more. I edited some digression out to keep this around an hour, and we'll have to have him back to go deeper and also talk about Drift, who's got a special place in our hearts as they play a crucial role in the MetaDAO history and have built a chat team and SIG product. It was a great discussion, and I'm looking forward to the next one. Enjoy the episode. Hi, Bigz.
Hello, GM.
How are you?
Good. We were just talking for like 10 minutes before you hit record. So now we're finally starting.
Yeah, we said that we should probably record because we're going to cover interesting stuff and that would be missed in the pre-recording part. So let's get started. We'll get back to the monetary thing at the end. First, who are you?
Who am I? Have you seen Red versus Blue? Like
No.
No? Okay. I guess there's a funny, it always starts with like, why are we here? I guess, like, who am I? But yeah, it's just the stuff that was funny. Who am I? I'm Bigz, or some people call me Bigz. Some people call me Z. I work on Drift Protocol, and I am huge MetaDAO fan and possibly a contributor, depending on who you ask. Before crypto, I worked in quantitative finance. I worked on the buy side, which is interesting for being someone on the buy side who comes to develop smart contracts on Solana versus a lot of sell side HFT people who work on Solana. So that's kind of the interesting difference about me versus other Solana developers.
Can you explain a little bit what's quantitative finance, what's the buy side? I think it's quant is the intersection between math, statistics, finance, computer science, all these things, and it's like why like you have analysts who build models to price financial instrument and manage risk. You have traders who design the algorithm and implement them. You have financial engineers that create the financial products. Like there are many different stuff. So can you be more specific and explain for people who don't really know what's quantitative finance?
Sure. So quantitative finance is just like the next evolution. If you were to read like old financial trader textbooks, like it's the next evolution of technical analysis. And technical analysis is just people who are looking at charts rather than fundamental data for the most part. I mean, maybe it's a combination of fundamental and technical, but it's like pure, like almost algorithmically driven or mathematically driven trading versus like versus something a little bit more manual or long term, right? And then maybe like buy side versus sell side. Like when I said buy side, that's mostly like somebody who's typically a taker in markets, and a sell side person is kind of like either the exchange kind of itself or like market makers who are providing like two-sided liquidity. So yeah, like the buy side is basically has an opinion about where prices are going to go more so than the sell side, which is just trying to collect a spread or trying to make money off of transactions themselves.
Okay. So you were more building models or implementing them?
I guess there's not really that much of a difference, like implementing or building models. Is that what do you mean?
Yeah. Oh, I actually don't know. But I know, for example, in the AI field, you have some people that are really, really good at math, but they are like engineering skills is more like they do a bit of Python, but not too much in the kind of efficient implementation side. Whereas you have people who are really, really good engineers, but they are not expert in the specific branch of math. So they work together with it's specialists working together because no one can be deep enough in each branch of the skill set.
Right. Okay.
Was it like that for you?
Yeah, I guess it was more like everybody knew how to do a little bit of both, but then maybe there's some comparative advantage within the team. Like, oh, this person is better at doing like this person's better at implementing this type of model, and this person's better at implementing this model, and then this person's better at designing this type of model. So you can think like somebody's really good with using EMAs, or someone's really good at like risk factor maths. Like it's basically like there was a lot of difference between what people were specialized in, but everybody knew how to code. Even like PhD older people, they could write production level code for the most part.
Do you know how big the firms are in general?
Oh, I mean, there's like small, medium, large, right? Like there's like ginormous hedge funds. They're doing both buy and sell side, but then there's also like small teams, prop trading. Like that just means like some guy wants somebody else to invest their money, and there's like, I don't know, like a very small team managing that person's money. So there's a lot of opportunities, like both big and small, in quant finance.
I see. And are there some who came into crypto that you're familiar with?
The place that I was working was very reluctant to go into crypto. Like basically, they couldn't figure out if there was actually a fundamental value, right? So I think even though like you had like CME and like all these other exchanges list Bitcoin futures and Ethereum futures, like a lot of these shops were nervous until deeper into 2021 to actually engage. And then even still, like it's almost like you almost have crypto specialists trading the crypto markets, and then you have traditional firms like not really getting that involved. Yeah.
Okay, I see. And what led you to find crypto?
I guess during the pandemic, I think a lot of us were spending a lot more time at home and a lot more time on the internet than normal, right? So I think I was just kind of like, I found this thing like in early 2021 or late December, like crypto prices were really captivating, and I was just like looking into Ethereum for the most part and like Ethereum DeFi, and yeah, I saw like DeFi itself, like there were people who were actually like borrow lending. Like people are actually doing economic activity versus like the ICO craze in 2018. And I guess I was just trying to learn as much as I could. And eventually I found some people who told me about Solana. And I'd never heard of Solana until they told me. And yeah, just tried to learn as much as possible in like a few months.
So it was not the job who led you to crypto, but more like on the what you were doing on the side and talking with people, right?
Yeah, I think I was intrigued by it, but I just never had that. I never had somebody like push me over the edge until like I was talking with I started talking to people who were actually working in crypto. But like I always knew what crypto was, and I had like Bitcoin, like like I was familiar with Bitcoin and stuff, but I just didn't know anything about DeFi or really understand like the use cases at all.
So you studied mainly mathematics or computer science?
I studied computer science and economics, so it's kind of like both of them. But I didn't take any like I wasn't like mathematically rigorous or mature is the word I would always use compared to some of my other peers who worked there. So.
And by the way, what age did you learn to code?
What age did I learn to code?
Yeah.
I think I first started in high school. I think the first thing I ever coded was like in Flash. And and I took a CS class at my high school.
Well, was it the thing in browsers back in the days that you need to
Yeah.
install?
Yeah, like Flash games. I don't know if you know what that is.
Okay. Is it Java? No.
I don't even remember. I think it had its own weird
Okay.
thing. That was probably Java-like. But I learned Java was actually the language I learned in high school class. It doesn't really matter what language you learn. Just like you just understand machines can do things you tell them to do this way.
Do you enjoy coding a lot? Do you code every day? What kind of language do you work with?
Yes, I do enjoy coding. It would be great if I code every day. If I don't code, I feel like I didn't really do much. Like if I'm just talking and planning or just reading code, I don't feel productive, and I always like end my day feeling a little bit sad. Maybe that's irrational, and it's also part of like getting like managing teams and stuff more versus like individually coding. But yeah, it does make me sad when I don't code. Languages that I'm using, I feel like I've been using a lot more Python recently, especially when it comes to like data analysis and dashboard building. But all the Solana smart contract stuff, which I've contributed a lot to for Drift, like doesn't, I mean, you could use Python. I think there's some like unsupported thing called Seaborn, but everything's in Rust and everything uses, at least for Drift, uses Anchor, which is like a little framework for making Solana smart contract code a little simpler, like abstracting it a little bit.
When was Drift started again? The V1.
When was it started? The V1 started like and all the repos are there, so you can look at the very first few commits. But I'm pretty sure it started like summer of 2021, and V1 was on Solana mainnet near the end of that year.
And Anchor was already there in 20. I don't remember.
Yeah, Anchor was there super early. Like Armani wrote it after writing Serum without Anchor and suffering, is at least what I remember of the story. I hope I didn't say that wrong, but yeah, it's just really difficult writing Solana smart contract code at that time, even more so than it is now. There were way less examples. This was pre-Phoenix. This was big examples written in native Solana smart contract, like Solana stuff that you could actually reference. Like there's basically nothing to reference.
Why was it so hard? Was it because it was very repetitive that you need to write helper function to do everything? And so it was really long and cumbersome to implement even something simple? Or was it just hard because, I don't know, you had to figure out obscure stack traces to find out what bug, or like there was no error message? Or I remember Tolly said at some point that Solana, they had limited funding, so they planned to do EVM support, but they couldn't. So they basically focus on shipping the runtime, and they give you a syscall, and you have to find a way to work with that. Was it that level of glass showing, or?
Yeah, I think when people, and the people who always say chew glass, like I hate it. Like I don't want to chew glass. I want to like iterate and improve and test, and cover like lots of test coverage, right? Like chewing glass, I feel like is like, sounds dangerous to me, especially for DeFi. But yeah, it was really hard to just debug things. I mean, at some point when we were writing, like the way that we were writing tests, like sure, you can implement some simple math logic and there's annoyances with that, like integer math and the like. But just actually running a local test involved having all of your installation versions be really good or really in sync across like so many different things, which is painful to set up. Just setting up a development environment on your computer was painful. That was number one. Number two, I guess, is like running a test. Before, like, I think we were trying to test everything end to end using like TypeScript and running a local validator, and just spinning all that up takes a while. And then you run your test, and then you try to modify state until you can actually get to the line of code that you're interested in, and then it fails with a very esoteric message. And just imagine repeating that process like multiple times for weeks. Like, there's a lot of like brain numbness with the process. Like you're not intellectually stimulated, you're just kind of like struggling. And that was kind of the only way that we knew how to test things before, which is embarrassing because there are so many different steps to testing now. For instance, you can write like cargo tests, which is just like really simple Rust test where you can test the Rust logic before you test the like Solana account state updating logic. And there's also this thing called bank run, which is like a really slimmed down local validator where you can control so many other things like the clock, right? Like just what time is it, right? Like how do I increment the time to see if I earned or had to pay any interest rates, right? So being able to really control those things quickly and being able to iterate quickly, I think is just so paramount to developing complex software. And from 2021 to now, 2024, like it's gotten so much better on Solana, but it's still not like military grade or anything like that. Like there's still so much more to go. And yeah, I think as that gets better, we'll start seeing better and better applications. I guess maybe a difference between Solana and Ethereum, like culture-wise, is just like Solana is still under massive development, right? So everything's kind of in flux, and it's always kind of annoying for a developer to have to keep updating, this and that. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like once things are in a more stable place, I don't know if they ever will be in a stable place, but it certainly seems like for the next year or two, like they'll still be lots of development changes and breaking changes, if you will. So
let's move to the discussion on Futarchy. To me, you're a contributor. I saw that you review the programs. You've been active in the Discord since day one. You've also built some data dashboard. You've also you're probably not the only one, but you've been a big voice for Futarchy, and Drift adopting Futarchy has also really helped the project get legitimacy and attention from other people in the ecosystem that were maybe not paying super close attention because they were busy with other stuff. So you've added a ton of value. Can you explain a little bit the story of how you found out MetaDAO and how you started to contribute and the kind of path?
Yeah, I guess after FTX fiasco for Solana, it was very quiet on Twitter. Like maybe a month or so after. I mean, maybe people were talking about gossip and drama around that event, but Prophet was just posting all these weird esoteric philosophical things, right? Like Prophet's Twitter account is very small. It was reply guying Chris and I, Chris being other contributor on Drift. And yeah, we were just like talking to him, and he had so many interesting takes, and he was interested in Solana, and he's like new in Solana. So it's definitely just like a very interesting guy. You could tell he was really, really passionate about like a lot of crypto stuff. And then in particular, I think he had this grandiose idea around like a multi-layered Futarchy DAO, and just watched him slowly implement the V0 of MetaDAO like over the course of that year, 2023, which was that was a great year for being a dev and just building and heads down, focused on the work. Because there was still like there were still enough people on Solana, but Solana wasn't like overrun by tourists, I guess. Maybe that's a mean thing to say, but yeah, it was just a very focused, very diligent guy who definitely wanted to keep following what he was doing. And yeah, I started like reading about Futarchy, kept talking about Futarchy. So I was like, what is this thing? Why is that such a bad name? And yeah, I started reading more and more Robin Hanson stuff. So yeah, I've actually been listening to a lot of like economists and stuff since I started talking with Prophet. I've been super engaged in that side of things.
Economist, like
Robin Hanson, it's like Tyler Cohen. I don't know, just like all these like university guys who write blog posts and have like they only know about crypto a little bit, but they have a lot of like more general observations that I think are interesting.
So not the like kind of classical school of thought economics, but more like recent and alive people who talk about economics today, right?
Yeah, just kind of like more disciplined social scientists, I guess.
But not people who talk about the kind of day-to-day state of affairs in the market, but more people who talk about philosophically or first principle wide thinking about economics. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and on their blog they post like, "Hey, the vibes have shifted on this election." Like they post stuff like that. Like there's always the day-to-day news, but I think they always try to like share, more deeper, more long-term, less short-term like snippets.
I see. You have to give me the list after, or maybe if you have it in mind, you can give it now.
Yeah,
like the top 3-5 guys, maybe, or more if you have more.
I've been listening to this Tyler Cohen guy. He has this website, Marginal Revolution. I mean, there's a ton of things like this. People have also recommended like more sensational people. Like I've never even looked this up. I'm just bringing this up. It's somebody named like Bronze Age Pervert or something. Like a lot of my peers like keep talking about it. I'm like, who is this? But I assume he probably writes a blog similar to this Marginal Revolution blog. But yeah, it's just cool.
Okay.
It's a cool way to track the news. I used to go on like Hacker News a lot more, but now I just kind of scroll on this blog just to get the news, if you will.
You found MetaDAO that way, and so you reviewed the first contracts, right? Did you do some back and forth on the design implementation, or it was obvious that conditional market was the right way to implement it? And like, can you explain a little bit how that happened?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, there are so many implementation details that I could go into that I think MetaDAO needs to improve upon. So many dimensions it could improve upon. But I guess I wasn't originally thinking about the UX nightmare that is MetaDAO, right?
Mhm.
Like I was kind of thinking about it. Well, the UX is always handled by somebody else, but the backend needs to be pristine and it needs to be robust, right? So I think at that time I was focused more on the robustness of the backend. I think now there's a lot of feedback on the UX and even just like the meta of trading these markets. Like, but what was the question again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, because there is two branches to explore. There is the implementation detail from a kind of architecture standpoint on the program to be efficient, from a optimization, compute resource consumption, and optimization from a capital efficiency point of view. And there is also the question of what design is works the best and for what. Because there are ways in theory to implement Futarchy that are very different, and there are trade-off. And I think we can always reason about this from a theory perspective, but the truth is it would be best to find out from practical experience.
Right.
But yes, so the question was on the program side.
Yeah, I guess on the program side, there were a lot of like hard-coded constants, right? Like the spread needs to be this big. The TWAP can only change by this much. So I was like kind of when I was reviewing, I was saying like, okay, these are good numbers, but there needs to be basically the program needs to adapt as it learns how people are using it and it's gaining more information about how this implementation is doing, right? I think from what I was saying earlier about all the testing and stuff, like I think every application at this stage on blockchain needs to be super iterative. Like you need to adapt. It needs to adapt, but I mean, it also needs to be safe. I mean, like for how it's being updated and bug free, et cetera, which is kind of on the testing side. But like applications need to be able to adapt quickly when we're at this like petri dish stage. So the original contract was, Profit was adamant about it being immutable and having all these values stay the way they are, and like he considered it like this will be our Stonehenge, and like other we can just release a new program, which I saw as inevitable and happened very shortly after. I think MetaDAO has released 4 programs or so by now, and it still probably needs to release a lot more or update its current one. So yeah, I guess I was really critical about that part of it. I didn't really like how the TWAP was implemented. Not to get too hung up on the details again here, but being a expanding window versus a rolling window, and like how the markets were finalized, I didn't think was robust enough for like the whole minority protection thing that I've preached about a few times in the Discord. But yeah, I just gave him a lot of feedback. But all in all, I said this seems to be sufficient for experiment 0. So that was kind of my take. Like there was no major issue. I think maybe the spread versus the TWAP threshold wasn't really considered. I didn't really consider that a problem at the time, the same way that I do now, where I think that the spread needs to be lower than the threshold. Otherwise, you can have these weird games where things can pass, but nobody can arbitrage it. And it just becomes like a who's willing to post liquidity constantly on chain game, or who wants to crank the TWAP on their market, but not the other one. So yeah, I think we learned a lot just like the first few months of watching the MetaDAO experiment. But ultimately, there was no devastating issue with it. Right? I guess you were there too. Did you see any major consequence?
No, I didn't. We've been pretty lucky with that, because there's always something that can slip through, I guess. Like it's hard to get to risk 0. Initially we launched with an order book. You miss it too, right? I guess. Do you think it will be
I think
back
you need
soon?
both. You need order book. I mean, this is what Drift did, but it's like you need multiple sources of liquidity, because order book liquidity on chain is just too costly, both on an individual user's time or market maker integrating time, and also just transaction cost or latency arbitrage that can occur. Because it's not, it's not a SEX endpoint. You're interacting with the blockchain, and as fast as Solana is, it's tough to versus a centralized exchange. So
And
I really
do you-
think, I really think
Sorry.
the hybrid is good. I think you can have people on submit orders when they want to of size at specific prices, and then you also have this more robust liquidity backstop where maybe you can make the proposer or other people LP for a high fee, but at least it's like there's some control on the price and people can buy slivers at small prices without material price impact. So even a thin backstop, I think, would be great. Keep that spread low so that even small volume can lead to accurate pricing.
And when you say hybrid, you mean like both program being one, or
Yeah, I guess I've also mentioned this too, but the conditional vaults, conditional market, mint and redeem, doesn't necessarily need to be tied to every market that those tokens trade on. The only thing that's relevant for MetaDAO is what is the average price of the markets that's trading on, right? Like when you mint and redeem these conditional tokens, you could trade them on Jupiter. If somebody else opened a market, right? There could be a ton of trading there. And you basically want like almost like an aggregator to know what was the average price over some windows versus like creating this like big central box and saying everybody needs to trade here. Even though we minted all these fungible tokens, like they're not useful anywhere else across DeFi. Only keep them here. Like I guess I'm more against that than like trying to come up with a more composable solution.
I see. So the conditional vault would be different, separated from the logic of the market it trades in. I think
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
already two separate
yeah.
programs, but maybe they are linked. I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with the details.
I mean, someone could spin up a Phoenix market to trade a conditional MetaDAO Proposal 10 token. Like you can spin that up, and then people can trade there, right? It's not like the order book is forbidden per se. It's just not going to be tracked by the TWAP, which I guess is what people desire anyways. But like an arbitrager could just arbitrage the AMM between that and the order book. So like
Yeah.
it's mostly just like there's not enough people working on this project to give it the legs that the people who demand it to have. So I think that's why Nalik and Profit are so into fundraising right now to get some more developers.
Do you think, by the way, it's because there is a trade-off between what the project was in the beginning, where Prophet really leaned back and let people from the community come and do stuff, and the direction it's taking right now, where it's more like let's raise and build a core team and execute. Because I think this kind of Silicon Valley model is great to focus, iterate super fast, and build something with a well-defined scope, or maybe pivot. But you basically have only the vision of the people leading that team, whereas when you're very on the open source community thing, sometimes people come with a completely different vision, and sometimes they're wrong, and that doesn't really affect the project. But sometimes they found something that didn't cross the mind of the other people who was working on it, and that kind of open new doors or new branch in the tree for the project. And because that's one thing I would love to see with Futurity, other models tried, and it's impossible for a small team to work on everything at the same time. Yeah, I guess.
It's kind of maybe just a pipe dream to think like I'm building an open source project and people are just going to contribute, even though I feel like people are busy, especially in crypto land. Like a lot of people are maybe contributing to open source doesn't have the same culture in crypto land versus like some of this AI stuff that's going on. Like, people are probably a lot more willing to put in a lot of work for that versus in crypto.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's what I had in mind. And it's true that in crypto, there is like the opportunity costs are so big. Because I guess in AI, if you contribute, you can get status, and which can help you get a job, which can then help you get money. Whereas in crypto, like people are much more mercenary. It's not that they don't have values, but sometimes it comes second. And I think that's one of the reasons the project now is shaping more with a core team, because even though people contributed, nobody was really doing things at a pace that was high intensity enough.
I think it's
That was
funny.
the
I know
problem.
that. Yeah, I know it's funny. Like Prophet was tweeting that he misses the bear market and that meme coins are annoying. It's mostly because of like you said, the opportunity cost. Like people are going to be more focused on, like especially in a mania market, like people are going to be more focused on trying to capture some value during that versus contributing to a project like MetaDAO and mining reputation, right, for a more long term thing. Like you said, like people are probably doing an AI. But yeah, during market mania, like people will not be people will not be mining reputation like that at MetaDAO, and will instead be focused on other crypto things.
Yeah. Let's go back to the future key implementation. Can you explain the difference between conditional and prediction market?
In a conditional market versus a prediction market, let's take the election, for example. People would want to say, like, what's Bitcoin going to be if Trump wins the US election? Like, what's the price of Bitcoin going to be if he wins? And what's the price of Bitcoin going to be if he loses? Right? Versus saying, like, oh, I'm just going to buy Bitcoin because I think it's going to go up, because I think that there's some probability of Trump victory or loss. So I think the conditional market, like, isolates things better and tells you, like, what are people's actual expectations given some event, rather than what is the aggregate expectation and what is the aggregate price because of that aggregate expectation. So the conditional market won't tell you if I think that this is more likely. The conditional market is going to tell you, like, what's the value of this given that this action takes place. So I think it's like you don't even have to know the odds that Trump is going to win in order to trade the conditional Bitcoin if Trump wins market. Like, you can ignore the odds of the victory or the loss and just say what you think are the fundamental changes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a great explanation, which make me think, can you also give the one on the how you define futarchy? Because you have a short one that's pretty good.
Oh, like how? Yeah, futarchy. I think people try to define it all the time in short, succinct ways, but the analogy I use is like with the way that, like, a Bitcoin fork has worked. So futarchy is almost like simulating a fork, just to see if people actually think, if I do the fork, will it be valuable, and will it be more valuable than the original? Right? We can find out what people think of the fork before we actually do the fork, and then do the fork if people are excited about the fork, right? That's kind of how I think of futarchy. So maybe, like, some of these Bitcoin forks wouldn't have happened if Bitcoin kind of had this, like, little futarchy module somewhere, you know?
Maybe, yeah. That's crazy to think about it this way. True. Where do you expect futarchy to be the most useful?
I think futarchy is mostly useful for allocating capital, especially large sums of capital. So you can think about it like, I don't know, you can think about it like budgeting, DAO budgeting between multiple departments, right? And you can think of, like, I don't think futarchy is going to decide, like, should we have this feature, yes or no. I feel like futarchy is going to decide, should we give this group money in order to do the things that they do. Well, maybe I'm sure there's some features that could, like, be really high stakes, and maybe futarchy will handle. But for nitty gritty things, futarchy is not a good idea, and I think futarchy is mostly a top of funnel on capital allocation. It prevents things like nepotism, other forms of simple corruption. It also just, like, is a good way to get information. Like, even if you're a really good CEO, like, the top CEOs are paid to do what futarchy is trying to do with an aggregation system. So you can think of the futarchy module as, like, the CEO of your organization in some ways, but the CEO doesn't do everything. Like, lots of people do. The people right under the CEO arguably possibly execute more of the work. And the CEO just kind of makes sure that they are staying in line with the mission and keeping all the constituents happy, if you will. So
Yeah,
maybe that makes sense.
It does. So sometimes you're competent on a subject and you're still outsmarted by the market. Sometimes you're not even competent on the subject and you can still use futarchy to get an answer. Even though, let's say, I don't know, I don't have an example in mind, but you're really not competent on a subject and you don't know experts that you can trust who are competent on the subject to take the decision for you. With futarchy, you can almost, like, kind of close your eyes and, like, let the market figure it out for you. That's pretty powerful power. So yeah, I think this is one of the underrated part of futarchy. There was a VC who told me that if you were a CEO, why in the world would you let the market decide something for you? And I was, yeah, the markets are. I think there is hubris to think that you always do better than the market. But anyway, I digress. What do you think is futarchy best value proposition? Is it the minority protection? Is it the incentivize people who would not pay attention to the DAO to pay attention to the DAO because they can make money? Is it aggregation of information? Like, is there something for you that's like the main value prop, or is it a mix of everything?
Yeah, I guess I really do like the minority protection that I think like a lot of systems cannot solve for other than this one. Like majority, it's like the wolves eating the sheep is like the most classic example of democracy being an issue, right? And the token voting maybe being like a more wealthy oriented version of democracy. So yeah, letting the sheep like GTFO is a very nice property. Rather than being kind of trapped and punished. I think that's a really nice property. And then the other one is kind of the impersonal nature of it. So, I'm a social person. I love working with people and being personal with them. But it's really hard to like, even if you don't really like a certain thing, but you really like the person, it's really hard to tell them like, no, like, I don't think this is a good idea. It can be really subconscious. Like, I like this person. Let's give them some funds, right? Like a lot of DAOs maybe work like that. Even if it's subconscious, like maybe this isn't the best person to give funds to, but I do like them and we get along, and getting along is definitely valuable. And I think the DAO would value like somebody who gets along to give them funds, but it's really hard to stay clear of like nepotism unless you have a slightly impersonal system for this like budgeting and stuff. So I really think like that also protects a lot of people who work in teams from having to do awkward, difficult things that are just for the better of everybody. I think the markets can kind of distill that, make things a little less personal than otherwise. So that's another property I think is kind of cool.
Yeah, definitely. It's not my fault. I don't give you the grant. It's the market.
It's also a stake. Like it's also the stake. Like it's like, let's say I like you, but I don't like you enough to risk losing, I don't know, $100 or $300 or whatever. So it's like you kind of have the stake to push the price impact to work, so it works with the other person. And it's like, rather than it's just for free, like, oh, I'm already a voter here. Like I'll just push it through. I lose nothing. I have no accountability. That's the other thing, not just the impersonal angle, but just like, if you really care, you got to put a little bit up. You got to risk some potential P&L.
And that's also you change the way you think about it, the mental model you have. It's not, do I want this to happen? It's will I make money with this trade? So how much value does it really give? And as soon as you start to see the market, the futurity like this, you kind of, it's not the same as traditional governance for me. It forces you to be much more pragmatic. And if you're not, you're just a noisy trader and you're like meat for the wolves, and that also helps. In this sense, it's kind of anti-fragile. What do you think are the main challenges that Futurity face? Is it reflexivity or like Keynesian beauty contest? Is it the difficulty to isolate cause and consequences? Is it the difficulty to use it for a small proposal? Like the proposal needs to accrue enough value that it's more than order magnitude more than the daily volatility, maybe, or like there are. I mean, we could list many potential things that are not solved today, but that doesn't mean that they are not solvable at all. I could expand on each, but it's your thoughts that I want to hear.
I think there are so many, and the fact that I think there are so many, and I'm still excited about it, should say a lot, just as a precursor. I think one is definitely the UX. Like, needs to be my intention should be really easy to submit to like a UI, and it should be able to run from there. And I shouldn't have to waste too much time trying to do the thing I want to do. The other points are like just the robustness of the whole thing. Like, people are trading, there's a TWAP, there's a threshold. Like, is that for optimizing short-term pricing, for long-term pricing? Like, how can we do it in a way where things are still liquid, but we're not like just optimizing a pump and dump, right? That's another one that I've thought about a little bit. And I guess also just the understanding, like, nobody trades conditional markets at all. The closest that people get excited about, maybe start thinking it's a prediction market, like we talked about earlier. But yeah, people don't really think about conditional markets. There's a lot of like parallel worlds. It's definitely a new way to twist your brain. which always takes time, right? So I think in the short term there'll be there's still like a hill to climb there, and it takes a really charismatic and convincing person to push it through for across a lot of groups. I think there needs to be a lot of like people pushing for it and being charismatic about it, and not being too stuck up or whatever about it, to not want to push it and be humble about it. So yeah, I think there's a lot of hills, a lot of hill climbing to get even to a better spot than it's at right now. But it's only been, what has it been? A year? Not even?
Yeah.
Like
not
6
even.
months? Yeah, so this is still a scrappy project. I feel like it's like, in a coiling stage, right? There hasn't been a lot of exciting improvements to the UI, UX, or program recently, because I know Profit and Malik have been focused on building out a long-term plan or roadmap, right, versus short-term wins. So yeah, I think it takes people like you and I and anyone who's listening to this to, like, we can't just cheer it on. I think we have to like try to do what we can to push it along too.
Yeah. I think that's also something for the project that's invaluable. The community it has, and I think it is also testimony that Futarchy is really interesting. There must be something there, because people really care, and there is not a ton of people, but there are really people that have been nerd sniped, and even like the market are not traded by that many people. And I think potentially one of the issues is that you cannot deploy size really today in those proposals. So the incentive to make money for some people is not high enough, which would be very different if it was trading. I mean, in the future, it would be very different. But even if you don't have a ton of trader, it doesn't take that many trader to price the thing properly. And there are some I'm very curious to have the discussion with. Like, for example, Dr. Datsal, I think he traded a lot of proposals. And like maybe Brob too. And Brob told me that he was spending a lot of time on Polymarket. Maybe he's there every day. I'm not even sure. No, it's not Brob. Sorry, it's Bodo. And he told me that he was on a Discord of Polymarket. So I went in the Discord and I checked how many messages he sent there. And there are like a few thousand messages there, and every day he's like there and he's talking with people about prediction market. And there is a new category of people that are like very excited and passionate and also degenerate gambler on this stuff. But it's actually not like the casino where it's just luck and you don't really provide any value to society. There it's like not luck, but it's also very useful for society. And that's kind of wild to see this new category, or like this new almost job, being created. So I wonder what it will look like for MetaDAO. I dream of a day where each proposal, there is a feed of proposal and you can sort them by type, like is it economics, is it programs, is it marketing, size, spread, all these things, and you only trade those you think you have an edge and that are like big enough for you to care or small enough for you to want to like yeah. Anyway, I digress again.
I mean, MetaDAO just needs the Polymarket skin. Just like re-implement the Polymarket UI and just have it connect to MetaDAO. I feel like.
Yeah. Why do you think Polymarket got the success it has today? Because I think it's been a decade.
It's a great app. It's all on the application side, the UI UX.
You think that's it? That's the thing?
I think that's the thing that pushes things to the point that we're talking about it right now. So you can write, obviously you need that good base layer, but these guys probably wrote this contract or wrote most of this logic. The back-end logic has been written and alive for over a year, probably, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
I'm just guessing. I think I looked into it once, and then all it takes is having a really strong and smooth user experience on the front end to get the snowball effect where you have more and more people joining the Discord and the app, it holds, the website's not crashing. It's, like you get real-time feedback on the website. I think like that's so important with the consumer side of things. I think if MetaDAO really focused on UI, UX, the back-end things aren't the things that are holding it back at the moment. I think it's mostly on the front end and explainers.
I see. And so you think they are pretty similar as project? Like, even though they are very different, they are still in the kind of same, like market used to predict value. No, not predict value. I don't know even how I would like frame the bucket, like their Venn diagram. But to me,
I
in
think
my
maybe
head, they are
MetaDAO
like,
just needs to have like a Bitcoin price if this happens. Like what's the example I used earlier? Like, what's the price of Bitcoin if Trump wins or loses the election?
oh yeah,
And just
Segwit
like,
or Segwit.
yeah, I think if you approached it from that angle and then had a governance tab, right? Like MetaDAO is basically just built a conditional markets program, and that can also service like basically very similar to poly markets, except people are trading a specific thing based on a specific event. And you just plug in an oracle or whatever, like that's what finalizes true or false. But yeah, I mean, at first principles, like they've just built conditional markets, and one of those tabs instead of politics should be governance, crypto governance.
Where would you focus your efforts today if you were the one building Futarchy? Like if you were in Prophet shoes, where would you focus your time?
I would probably focus on just building that, what I just said. I think that would pop.
Okay.
Assuming that's
Okay.
what you want to do is pop rather than just do research. If you want to have a pop-in application versus having a really nice research paper and getting some academic to retweet you to his 10 followers. Like, you can do that, or you could try to build a really successful application and get a lot more people's attention, and then
Yeah.
possibly the whole thing snowballs from there on the research side too.
Yeah, I think a year or two from now, we're gonna read some research paper on Futarchy with too much math in it, and yeah.
Too much
Anyway,
what?
Math, like
Oh, too much math.
some kids out of like MIT or something are gonna start writing about Futarchy with very very complex thought experiments on top of thought experiments, because it's just super intellectually stimulating. There's going to be PhD thesis on Futarchy, that's for sure.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
And what would you like to see people build with Futarchy? Maybe just before that, I forgot a question I wanted to ask you also is, have you thought about ways to use Futarchy to, I don't know, let's say you want to vote the best amount of tax for the country. So like most of the time people, they want to plug a deficit spending hole, or so they want to raise the tax, but past a certain point, if you raise the tax, you actually collect less revenue than if you don't touch them, or if you were to lower them. And maybe Futarchy would be much better at deciding that than either the voters or the politicians. But there is no obvious token to trade, so there needs to be proxy or an implementation way to tie it back. Have you thought about it? Do you have some ideas on how we could leverage this?
Yeah, this has been brought up a few times. I was actually, I guess I'll reveal it here instead of trying to write something cool. So yeah, I was thinking that similar to how, in order to converge to the right answer, you do like, numerical methods or gradient descent. Like this is how like AI models get trained. Like I think a lot of these numbers should just be almost more like that, or like even like a binary search. Like you can still have a binary market. Like should it be above this number, below this number, and you just keep incrementing you just keep running the market until you converge to the right solution. So you could just keep things binary and just keep launching a new market to either go up or down, right? On a certain number. I don't know if that's too crazy or not, but that basically matches like how a lot of things get solved, rather than like here's like a four market poll with these ranges. Like I feel like binary search is simpler. It's like Zuckerberg made face mash, right? Which was like two faces right next to each other. You pick the more attractive one. Like I think this A or B is like an easier market for a lot of people to rationalize than multiple choice.
Yeah, that's true. But how do you tie that back to a metric like GDP or collected revenue? Because there is no token to trade, right?
Oh, I was thinking like if it was, price go up. I thought was like the how we decide what action is better. So
because
there would be
if we want oh yeah, sorry.
Because it's like a tax token, tax rebate token. I don't know. Like it doesn't have to be like you could have tokens that represent things for the future. I mean, right? Like you just have like these are points. These are citizen points, and the more citizen points you have, the better. The less taxes you have to pay in the future. I don't know. Something like that.
Like my thinking on that is that you need to remit new token. Like, well, let's try not to make a too big hole about that, but keep it short. Basically, if you have a project like, for example, Drift, now market cap is too high for it to use Futarkey with the Drift token for certain proposal. But maybe Drift could create sub token for certain product. Like, let's take Helium, for example. Helium has the HNT token, but now it also has the mobile token. That's optimized tokenomics and revenue and links and everything for just the mobile product. And you could use the mobile token to use Futarkey more accurately on a proposal that concerned the mobile network of Helium instead of using HNT. But you could go even further by saying, okay, now we're going to have a mobile per city or a mobile per plan, like plan being how much you pay per month for how much data. And those tokens, like they become kind of if the transaction costs are like almost negligible, like close to zero, they just become a metric of measuring the economic activity somewhere and of using Futarkey to also price the right decision, the value of each decision, and act on them. And I've been wondering, like, how it's not creating like does that make sense? Like subtoken and subtokens and subtokens. And
Yeah, I mean, you're
I don't know
making
if
like
this is the way.
it's like multiple CEOs, and then you like if you think of Futarkey as the CEO, like you're just making a subunit that has a different CEO, and then you're asking that subunit CEO if this is good or bad. Right?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the right path. I haven't thought about it enough. There are also other solutions. I think Prophet mentioned making financial contracts that pay off relative to something, and then you make a trade that financial contract.
Yeah.
That's
I think that's what I was trying to say with like the citizen points. If you were talking like more of like a
Oh yeah,
citizen
right.
of a
Yeah.
country, it's like it doesn't need to be it could be like something that has like you want the price of these things to go up because that means that they're more valuable and people want to get more of them if there's more growth in the country or whatever. So it's like that's why I was thinking like, oh, future tax, like you don't have to pay as much in tax in the future if you spend your citizen points or something. It's kind of like a tax deduction. So it's like you kind of tie it like that's kind of a financial contract with the country, and then people will try to do things where, I mean, I'm really hand waving, but yeah, I can see how it can be like some derivative contract rather than like the governance token itself, like congressional seat token, right? Like that'd be you can make it more of like a financial product that people trade and try to move the price up versus like the actual powers that be.
Yeah, I wonder how much time it will take before we start to see financial derivative for Futarkey that solve this. Maybe we'll start seeing people talking about that next year. I don't know. That
If
will be
MetaDAO takes off
interesting.
with this polymarket skin, I think we could see it as soon as that gets popular. Like, you
Oh,
need to attract the
right.
brain power, and then the brain power will run lots of experiments. Like there'll be a team you never heard of that's trying this, and then you'll find them one day on Twitter and announce it.
Do you think MetaDAO should build a polymarket competitor? Like, would it be plus EV to spend some resources doing that?
Probably should ask more people, but I think it'd be cool. I don't know what the costs are, but assuming that you could snap your fingers and get some MetaDAO polymarket clone that's just trading conditional markets, I think that's a great way of teaching people about how conditional markets work and thus Futarkey, and also, just spreading the word, like having a really strong product like polymarket.
Yeah. Because at some point the vision was that MetaDAO would start to build DeFi products and acquire some or incubate some and slowly grow. I think that was very early days vision. And I've always thought that it would be super cool to have a polymarket on Solana. And I think there is an overlap between the kind of people who trade on polymarket and the kind of people who would be interested to trade on MetaDAO too. Anyway, if for Colosseum somebody wants to do the MetaDAO track, what would you recommend them to build? Do you have any idea?
To do the MetaDAO track? What do you mean?
You know when Colosseum invested in MetaDAO, they said that they would put
Coliseum. Okay.
Yeah, makes sense. Sorry.
Oh yeah, someone should just build. I keep talking about it. Someone
Okay,
should try to
okay,
build. That's gonna be my answer for every question that you ask. Maybe we've gone through all the questions?
I think so. Now we can talk about like the state of the market or the state of crypto, or you can pick maybe. In the end, I have to ask your advice for a successful startup because you've built one. your best and worst trades, and if you have a book to recommend. We can do that now.
Yeah, let's do
But
that.
I was also curious to hear your thoughts on monetary policy or stuff like that, because I know you have some takes there too. We still have a little bit of time. Do you want to do that?
Yeah. I think I just brought it up because I saw your tweet about, I think it was yours, but you were talking about like U.S. debt, interest, etc. Right?
Yeah.
Was that you?
Yeah. I actually have been trying to understand economics, but I didn't get a proper education, so I've like took all the puzzle pieces in the wrong order and tried to figure out how the system works. At some point, tried to figure out the euro dollar market stuff, and it's just super confusing. But yeah, monetary. Anyway, and I think I've been doing that because of crypto, because you start to reveal the problems in the system, and then you wonder how we reach that state and why it's so obfuscated and like I don't know the word, like nebulous, and you start to listen to people that are more expert than you, uh, and but the loop doesn't close, like at least for me. I haven't got to the bottom of it, so I'm still trying to figure out, but it feels that we are at a moment in time where things are getting closer and closer to kind of a tectonic shift, and things might break. I think they will. So I think more and more people are starting to get interested about that, especially the young people who are like wondering what the fuck are we inheriting and is going to happen to us.
Yeah. No, I've noticed that too, especially with my peers. Like, I don't pretend to even really understand everything either, and I think even a lot of like first principles thinking like gets kind of confused and muddled, right? So yeah, I totally agree. I'm probably a lot more optimistic than you on on things, but maybe that's also like just because, just because I feel like I'm more excited about technological growth and how that ultimately I think solves a lot of issues when it comes to monetary policy. But yeah, we can talk about it.
Okay, so do you think, like, because I agree, there is this race between technology concentrate the power into the hands of fewer and fewer people. So there is a race between the mass emancipating themselves and finding ways to coordinate and to become sovereign, or like the corrupted few reaching a state where we can enter like totalitarian dystopia on the whole planet. And like they on a button, like they have an army of AI drones and whatever, and they have all the data, so
It
they know
sounded
you're
like Star
gonna.
Wars.
Yeah, man, it could. I could see it happen. Like, but at the same time, the opposite could happen. And I think it depends on. It's kind of a race. Like we don't know yet who's kind of gonna win, like the many or the few. And I think it's the same thing for. Will we reach escape velocity and have productivity miracle and be able to take care of all the elders and all these things, or will all this coming not come in time? Like for example, all the AI revolution is great, but it's not real world stuff, right? So if we want to have robots to build stuff, we still need to extract the copper and all the other materials from the earth. And there's been low capex in commodities for a while, and the workforce is also smaller than it used to be in many places. There are geopolitical problems that make that some place where there are the resource you cannot really use them. So I actually don't know if we'll move fast enough to evade our problems in time, or if we will be caught back by our problem. And I don't think at all we will collapse. I just think that we have a rough decade or two coming. Maybe not two, because progress is kind of this exponential curve. So I'm not a doomer. I'm just a bit anxious about the short-term future, short to mid-term. I think I do think long-term we win.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be lying if I think a lot of people think about at least the realm of possibilities, like of things. I guess there's a lot of things that you can imagine that could be like short term, large scale knockbacks, right? But I guess like there's always shocks, I guess, in a system, just like any world. But I feel like things like do move, at least like things move somewhat gradually between regimes. Like there's always like trend lines and stuff to kind of track. Like I think let's just take the AI thing for example. Like, is a super intelligence going to come like almost like nearly atomically and do crazy things in the world, or is AI going to progressively improve to the point where everybody needs to like year over year, possibly like just adapt more, but not like in an atomic shock of like, that like is almost disruptive more so than like, right. I guess that's like, those are kind of two schools of thought, right?
Right.
So then I guess how does monetary policy tie into these things? Like, I guess they try to, like, for fiat money, like they try to increase or decrease interest rates in order to basically stop people from doing risky investments, or to encourage people to do more risky investments. And somehow that knob like seems to influence a lot of where people pour capital, in order to do things. But I guess I don't know how much that ties into AI. Like US has pretty high interest rates, world has relatively higher interest rates, and there's still a lot of people like iterating and developing on AI.
Actually, I'm going to tell you the same thing that I told Prophet and Narok. We're going to have to come back to really debate these things, because it's a really long discussion to get into all the effect and consequences and branches of the reasoning of what could happen. Like, for example, do you think that hiking rates is still restrictive, or is it stimulative because the debt is so big that when you hike rates, you actually pay a lot of money to... But then the question is, who gets this money? It depends of who holds your debt, and not just which country, but which social class of people. Do they spend it or not? Does it goes to business? How is the debt structure? Like, all these things are a bit. We need I think at least an hour to debate this.
Yeah, totally. I saw your graphic, which was like how high the interest payment is on the debt now. So you're saying there's people that say that it could be actually stimulative to have higher interest payment, or like it pushes inflation, like perpetuates inflation thing?
I'm still kind of learning, and I also have many other stuff to do. So I hope in the beer market I will get some time to read a lot of books. I still view myself as unsure of what I say, like cautiously learning, So I have a conviction. Yeah, I do think it's stimulative at the rate we are right now to hike at, kind of. But I'm also aware that I might be wrong, because this kind of conclusion might be form of wrong hypothesis. So I'm like building my mental tree of how the economy function, and I'm like slowly trying to find out which branch is solid and which is not. And it's really a struggle, and it's been years that I'm trying to figure that out. So, but I'm still very...
I guess macroeconomics is just so it's just this interconnected system that's so hard to understand. Like, even like the theory of macroeconomics like hasn't been super useful. So
100%.
You really just have to have a lot of faith in the Federal Reserve to like track all this data and like just go up or down in a way to keep things stable. There's like a lot of faith in that system.
Yeah. When I hear someone say that he's getting into macro, my advice is always be aware that it's a years-long journey that will give you information that are not actionable necessarily. You might end up in the middle of the bell curve with all this knowledge that you didn't end up connecting all the dots. And
and that's I preface this whole thing with tech, like racing on innovation is definitely like the most useful, actionable thing. That societies can do for improving. I mean, like, I don't know. There's so many schools of thought. Like, maybe we stop innovating, right? Like, but I feel like innovating is like a pattern-tested way to improve the outcome for the future. Maybe.
That's one of the crazy things about city too. Some people complain that city is retarded, but it really depends who you follow. If you follow people like you, the nerds who talk about the tech and about like the finance or the economy, it's super interesting. The other day, like Robre, another futurist, he was talking about how in a few years, it was quoted a tweet of someone talking about Claude 3.5, and he was saying that in a few years, or maybe in a few months, everybody will start building its own SaaS, because if you think about it, if it's become as easy as prompting what feature you want, where do you want the buttons, first you don't have to pay the subscription fee, which is a big saving. You can build the perfect tool. So instead of having 10 tools, you have one. You can remove the features you don't want. You can add the features you didn't find anywhere. You can personalize it. You can adapt it. You can evolve it. All these things. I was thinking, like, damn, like if that really happens, and I think the same as him. I already thought a lot about that. I don't know what happened to the valuation of all the tech in the US, because like there is a ton of SaaS that's been printing and that has super high value.
Well, hold on.
And
if it's that easy to do that, then like the ones that have armies of like developers should be able to do something even better, right? Like that's the argument. It's like as something gets easier, you can actually build on top of that to do like immensely more like impressive things.
Yeah, but like let's say you have more people to build a washing machine. How much better can the washing machine be? Like at some point,
Have you done laundry? Like it'd be way
not
better.
really.
Yeah, exactly. If you do enough laundry, you can imagine the ways that doing laundry could be way better. Like, what if I didn't have to touch anything? You know, like I don't know.
Yeah, sorry, I digressed a lot.
Okay.
I do want to pick up. Yeah, I have to cut some stuff. Do you think do you follow our supply from our that chat?
What's their name?
Our supply. You know, mining and solar.
Yeah, I know of it.
What do you think about the project? Do you have the time to really dig it?
It would be so nice if like CAPTCHA, or like did something useful with its proof of work. So do you know CAPTCHA? Like Google and other companies are like using that to solve and like label data sets, right? Like here's the motorcycles, where's the traffic light? Like, you know, what's the number in this box? Like it'd be really cool if OR could find something like that. So like the work that people do is actually constructive. And you could say the same thing about Bitcoin, but being on Solana itself, like there's lots of things to crank. There's so much stuff where it's like including some aspect of that would be really impressive. And maybe that's just another project, but
yeah, because I think I'm not updated on everything he's been doing, but he's been tweeting a lot about the problem in the distribution of Bitcoin, which it's like in crypto we still don't have perfect distribution, but anyway, and he's trying to fix that with OR somehow. But that brings back the question on monetary policy and how can you build like first what's the ideal currency? What should the currency be? Do you think Bitcoin does a good job as a currency, or do you think we need something more elastic depending on different parameters of the economy?
I think you definitely want something elastic, and I think like things being inflationary is pretty smart because it's like you have to use this productively and try to make a higher return than the inflation. Otherwise, people just hoard cash, similar to how people will just hoard Bitcoin. And like if you didn't hoard it early enough, like too bad, type of thing. Like I don't know. I don't think that's a really smart long-term thing, other than like a store of value, rather than like a currency. I think a currency, like you need it to you need to incentivize people to do commerce, or at least that's the whole capitalism thing. I'm not endorsing certain types of things, but yeah, that like ends up working really well, I think, for capitalism.
Do you see projects that are working on this that you have respect for in crypto today?
That are working on making a viable currency? Or
yeah.
Well, it's really hard because I can't like buy food with Sol, right? Like I have to spend dollars. So I feel like Solana and Ethereum, I guess, are have some nice properties. Like they just have this like stake that you only get if you lock up, similar to like a bond, right? So like I don't know, like there's some more currency-esque aspects of that versus Bitcoin being more like gold, right? Like there's an inflation rate on both of those. At least I think they both have inflation rates. So yeah, I mean, we'll just see how the Solana Ethereum battle goes. It seems like Solana is catching up. Hopefully it keeps catching up.
I think you will. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're all focused on that. That's the thesis.
Yeah, I guess there is still a big mispricing. Well, let's close with your the last three questions. We'll have to do another discussion for going deeper in monetary policy, and I also would like to talk about the story of Drift because it's a very impressive protocol. Can you give me your advice to build a successful startup?
What's some good advice? I guess startups are definitely high risk endeavors, right? So I don't think anybody can give you the advice to turn your idea into a successful proof. Like that should that just goes without saying. Like you definitely you want to take a single bet. Like I bet that people will want to use Solana, so I'm going to build an application on Solana. Like taking single bets like that, I think are pretty smart for startups. Rather than taking like hundreds of different bets. You want almost like one uncontrollable thing, and then everything else is controllable. That would be maybe some advice that I would give. What's more good advice? Yeah, you want to stay for a startup. Like I guess they say you should be adaptive and pivot, but you also don't want to get distracted and just chase the hot new thing. So that kind of goes with just like stay hunkered down on like one thing you're betting on and just see it through. Like you don't have to spend years on it, but just see it start to finish unless things change drastically.
At what point do you consider an hypothesis disproven?
It's really hard. I think sometimes you can get like, it's kind of like getting liquidated on a trade, right? It's like you can have a stop loss that's earlier, but sometimes your stop loss gets hit and then the price just moons right after that, right? So I'd say it's
Right.
not that different versus a startup.
That's an amazing analogy. I love it.
Yeah. I think it really comes down to the conviction. So if you are a successful startup founder, you usually have really high conviction on something and almost to the point of delusion to others. But it's not like you're 20 and you have high conviction. Like you don't when you're 20. That's for most people, at least. Like you've gone through some hoops before, and you know this thing, and you see other people just don't know this thing, and you just want to make a bet on it. Again, it won't always work, but I think having some experience and then doing a startup is way better than the idea that you need to start a startup like when you're 20, and if you don't do it then you're just you're stuck in the office for the rest of your life. Like I don't think that's true at all. I think even the NVIDIA founder was similar. Anatoly's the same. Like, yeah, there's definitely value to having some experience, because then you actually can get conviction on the stuff you work on. I guess last thing I want to say about startup advice is you want to work with people who are good at what you aren't good at. So you want to it's the comparative advantage, the complementary skill set that you want. And with those people, you want to compromise in places that you aren't super hung up on and you don't think are absolutely essential for success. So the quid pro quo, when you work with somebody, it's not just your way or the highway. Again, some people have more hierarchical things where it's like, well, I'm in charge, you listen to me. But I think it's really important to compromise with the people that you work with, especially if you think, if they got this, like, is this going to prevent our success? And if the answer is no, then you should be willing to make some compromises. Don't be a what's it called? Like a doormat. Don't give everybody everything they want, but you definitely want to not be too like full of yourself, or in the way where it blocks other people getting some things.
I see. That's very, very good advice. Thanks. The get some experience one is also great, I guess, because if you're a founder, as soon as you drop out, you never experience what it is to be under the command of someone who's sometimes stuck at his job or at management or some stuff, and learning from the mistake of like being in the role of the employee, even if it's just an internship or something, like it can be super helpful, because it helps you to get the empathy and put yourself in the shoes of people and not to do the thing that you didn't like people to do to you. I think that's also something that's really useful. Can you give me your best and worst trades? Don't be too specific if you don't want, but I guess it's fun.
Yeah, I guess my worst trait, you could just say more generically, is being more like too risk averse early on. So when I first started saving money, I think I was too scared of timing markets and stuff like that. Not for like a really long time, but I think I was just too nervous about like short-term price fluctuations and stuff. And I think that just made me more reluctant to invest and stuff. So I would say don't worry about short-term price fluctuations when you're investing. Then let's see. I'd say that's my worst. Well, what's my best? I guess just even believing in the Solana ecosystem during 2023, like post FTX. I saw a lot of smart people stick with Solana You know, they didn't really budge. Maybe it was just out of like, I think it was mostly out of like, there's nothing like calling me outside of this. Like Solana still is like pretty decent. I think on the dev side, like the chain started working way better. So there's just a lot of conviction there, and I think it led to, I think a lot of people did quite well from that, even probably more than some people expected. So like the speed of it. So yeah, I'd say those were my best and my worst.
Nice. And is there a book you would recommend a young guy to read?
A book that I'd recommend, I guess. I mean, I do like reading some fiction when you're, especially when you said young guy. So
It can be a girl, it can be an old guy, it
Oh,
can
yeah.
be, I don't know.
you should. I think people should read like the classics, right? Like the great books, especially when they're younger. Not calling you out for saying young, but yeah, when you're younger, I feel like you should try to read some of those stories. I think they just kind of mold you into it. It gives you like grit, or like determination, like especially like history. Like you can read a historical biography. I guess specifically you could read things like Brave New World or like 1984. Like those are probably like high school or early college books. But yeah, if you don't feel like you just need to only read computer science books or econ books, you should also read these stories because they translate to a lot of valuable like work ethic stuff.
Yeah, it's true. 1984 is a great recommendation. Okay, well, Bigz, thanks so much for joining me today. It was an amazing discussion. We'll have to do another round someday. There are so many stones left unturned.
We'll do one year anniversary podcast.
Yeah, exactly. But thanks so much, man. I really took a lot of pleasure having this discussion. You're an amazing dude.
It was a good one. Thank you. Likewise. I really enjoyed speaking with you.